For 50 years, the Strait of Hormuz has been a loaded gun pointed directly at the global economy. Everyone watches the water. But the real war isn't happening there anymore. Right now, hidden beneath the Arabian desert, a massive geographical hack is rewriting the rules of modern warfare. Saudi Arabia and its allies are not just building trade routes. They are constructing a fortified land bridge designed to do the impossible: delete an ocean from the map. By moving critical supply lines out of the sea and onto concrete, they are disarming Iran's greatest maritime weapon without firing a single shot. But this engineering marvel hides a terrifying strategic trade-off. You don't just erase a geopolitical choke point without consequences. You merely move the battlefield. And what Riyadh is actually building might be the most vulnerable static target in military history. Welcome to the new battlefield geometry of the Middle East. When we talk about geopolitics, we usually talk about fleets, fighter jets, and troop movements. But the most decisive weapon of the 21st century is not a stealth bomber. It is logistics. For decades, Iran has held a MasterCard in regional politics by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway where a massive percentage of the world's oil flows. Tehran did not need a blue water navy to project power. A few dozen fast-attack craft, sea mines, and coastal anti-ship missiles were enough to hold the global economy hostage. If negotiations failed, Iran threatened to close the strait. If sanctions increased, Iran threatened to close the strait. It was an asymmetrical nightmare for the United States Navy, which spent billions of dollars deploying carrier strike groups just to babysit commercial oil tankers. But Saudi Arabia realized something profound. You cannot defeat an asymmetric maritime threat by simply building bigger ships. You defeat it by making the ocean irrelevant. The first phase of this geographic hack sounds like a corporate logistics deal, but its military implications are staggering. Saudi Arabia partnered with MSC, the world's largest container shipping company, to create a hybrid trade network. Here is how the operational geometry works. Under normal circumstances, a cargo ship coming from Europe or North America has to sail down the Red Sea, navigate the Gulf of Aden, turn around the Arabian Peninsula, and sail directly into the Persian Gulf. This means sailing right past Iranian military installations. It means entering the kill zone. Saudi Arabia's solution was to cut the journey short. Instead of sailing around the peninsula, giant MSC cargo ships now enter the Red Sea and dock immediately at the Jeddah Islamic Port or King Abdullah Port on Saudi Arabia's western coast. From there, the cargo is unloaded using autonomous, high-speed gantry cranes. Within hours, thousands of tons of goods are placed onto fleets of heavy transport trucks. What happens next is a logistics marvel. These trucks form a river of steel, crossing roughly 1,300 kilometers of harsh Arabian desert, driving coast to coast until they reach the port of Dammam on the eastern side of the country. From Dammam, small, highly maneuverable feeder vessels distribute the cargo to the United Arab Emirates and other Gulf states. Think about the strategic value of this. Not a single container, not a single ship has to enter the Strait of Hormuz to reach the Gulf. The sea journey, which used to take weeks and carried immense insurance and security costs, is replaced by a highly secure, satellite-tracked highway corridor. In military terms, Saudi Arabia has compressed time and space. They have taken the maritime choke point out of the equation. But moving containers is one thing. Moving millions of barrels of crude oil is an entirely different war game. If you want to understand the true cost of bypassing Hormuz, you have to look at the arteries of steel buried under the sand. Saudi Arabia operates the East-West pipeline, widely known as Petroline. This is the absolute backbone of their strategic survival. It connects the oil-rich eastern provinces, which sit dangerously close to Iranian waters, all the way to the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea coast. We are talking about a massive engineering structure capable of transporting 5 to 7 million barrels of oil every single day. Further south, the United Arab Emirates has deployed a similar strategy. The UAE built the Adcop pipeline. This pipeline stretches nearly 400 kilometers, carrying oil from the Habshan fields directly to the port of Fujairah, which sits on the Gulf of Oman, safely outside the Strait of Hormuz. On paper, this is a brilliant geopolitical maneuver. It guarantees that even if Iran mines the Strait of Hormuz, Saudi and Emirati oil will still flow to global markets. It strips Tehran of its ultimate blackmail tool. But from a military perspective, the shift from sea transport to land pipelines introduces a chilling new vulnerability. When you use oil tankers, your assets are mobile. Ships can change course. They can be escorted by destroyers. But pipelines are static. They do not move. They are fixed coordinates on a map. By shifting their lifeline from the ocean to the desert, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have created the longest, most expensive static targets in the world. To protect these pipelines, you cannot use warships. You need layered air defense. You need Patriot missile batteries, THAAD systems, and early warning radars spread across hundreds of miles of open desert. The cost-exchange ratio here is brutal. Iran can launch a drone that costs $20,000 to hit a pumping station. Saudi Arabia has to fire a $2 million interceptor missile to stop it. We will return to this terrifying reality later. But first, we must examine how this infrastructure has completely rewired global alliances. By May 2026, the Saudi Ports Authority confirmed something that sent shockwaves through international markets. The Jeddah port is no longer just a regional hub. It is now directly connected to 9 major global megaports. This network reaches deep into the industrial hearts of Europe, connecting to Southampton in the UK, Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and Hamburg in Germany. But the true strategic masterstroke lies in the Pacific. Japan is heavily reliant on Middle Eastern energy. The Japanese economy is an industrial machine that requires uninterrupted fuel. The ports of Kobe, Nagoya, and Yokohama are now plugged directly into the Saudi bypass system. Japan holds a massive strategic reserve of over 16 million tons of oil. In the event of a crisis in the Asia-Pacific region, Tokyo cannot afford to have its supply lines held hostage by a conflict thousands of miles away in Hormuz. By linking directly to Jeddah, Japan is buying an ultimate insurance policy. They are bypassing the Iranian threat entirely. Intercontinental trade is no longer subject to the political moods in Tehran. Saudi Arabia is presenting itself not just as an oil provider, but as the unbreakable bridge of global trade. However, the most fascinating dynamic of this new network involves a country that theoretically should not be participating in it at all. If you follow mainstream geopolitics, you know that China and Iran are close. They have signed a 25-year strategic partnership. Beijing buys massive amounts of sanctioned Iranian oil. On the surface, China is Tehran's economic lifeline, the only superpower keeping the Iranian economy from complete collapse. But geopolitics is not about friendship. It is about cold, hard calculus. Look at the new Saudi logistics map. Slap bang in the middle of this network are the Chinese ports of Xiamen, Nansha, and Bantian. Why would China, Iran's biggest ally, enthusiastically participate in a Saudi project designed specifically to weaken Iran? The answer lies in geoeconomics. The Chinese Communist Party has one overriding priority: the uninterrupted survival of its supply chains. Chinese factories need Middle Eastern oil to keep running, and the world needs Chinese electronics and goods to keep flowing. A war in the Strait of Hormuz would be a dagger to the heart of the Chinese economy. Beijing knows that Iran is a volatile partner. Tehran's willingness to use militant proxies and threaten shipping lanes is a massive liability for Chinese grand strategy. Therefore, President Xi Jinping plays a double game. On one hand, he buys cheap, heavily discounted oil from Iran to fuel his domestic reserves. On the other hand, he plugs China's megaports directly into Saudi Arabia's secure, Hormuz-free network. When it comes to the survival of its billion-dollar export industry, China prefers to bet on the winning horse. They will not sacrifice their economic security for Tehran's geopolitical tantrums. This move quietly severs China's absolute logistical dependence on the Persian Gulf. From Washington's perspective, this is a strategic victory. The United States has spent decades acting as the global policeman in the Middle East. By forcing China to rely on Saudi infrastructure that is fundamentally protected by Western defense systems, the U.S. subtly keeps Beijing tied to a U.S.-aligned security architecture. While Saudi Arabia and the UAE secure the southern routes, an unexpected player is executing a massive flanking maneuver from the north. Iraq, a country ravaged by decades of war, is attempting to pull off one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in modern history. It is called the Development Road. This is a $24 billion mega-project starting from the Grand Fa port in Basra, southern Iraq. This project is essentially a high-speed rail and highway network stretching straight up through the Iraqi desert, crossing into Turkey, and connecting directly to the Mediterranean and the heart of Europe. Analyze the map. If the development road succeeds, goods coming from Asia can unload at the bottom of Iraq and be put on a train. That train bypasses the Persian Gulf entirely. It bypasses Hormuz. It bypasses the Red Sea. It travels over land through Turkey and straight into London or Berlin. Turkey's unique geographic position makes this possible. Ankara sees this as its opportunity to become the undisputed transit hub between Asia and Europe. For European countries, this is the ultimate diversification strategy. It creates a northern corridor that leaves Iran completely isolated from the east-west transit boom. Other nations like Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain, countries that were historically imprisoned by the geography of the Persian Gulf, are rapidly integrating into these new networks. The entire region is attempting a synchronized escape from the shadow of maritime warfare. It looks like a total victory. It looks like the end of Iranian influence. But war is never that simple. This is where we must face the hard reality of operational warfare. The narrative that Saudi Arabia has completely checkmated Iran is an illusion. You do not destroy your enemy's capability by moving the target, you just force your enemy to evolve. For decades, Iran's military doctrine was built around naval asymmetric warfare, swarm tactics, fast attack craft, naval mines. When Saudi Arabia moved its oil and cargo to the land in the Red Sea, those Iranian fast attack craft became useless. But Iran is not stupid. Tehran has been watching this geographic shift for years. And they have adapted. If your enemy moves their assets onto land, you don't need a navy, you need missiles. Over the past 20 years, Iran has built the largest and most diverse ballistic missile and drone arsenal in the Middle East. Remember the Petroline pipeline? Remember the massive desalination plants and the sprawling container terminals at Jeddah? They are entirely within range of Iranian medium-range ballistic missiles and Shahed suicide drones. In 2019, Iranian proxies launched a coordinated drone and cruise missile strike on the Abqaiq and Huraiz oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. It temporarily knocked out half of the kingdom's oil production. That was a warning shot. Iran's message was clear: you can hide from our boats, but you cannot hide from our drones. Furthermore, look at where Saudi Arabia is routing its safe traffic. They are sending it to the Red Sea, but the Red Sea has a choke point of its own, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And who controls the eastern shores of that strait? The Houthi movement in Yemen, an organization heavily armed, funded, and directed by Iran. By bypassing Hormuz, Saudi Arabia and global shipping have simply funneled themselves into another kill zone. The Houthis have spent the recent geopolitical crisis proving that they can effectively shut down Red Sea traffic using anti-ship ballistic missiles and drones. This is the brilliant, terrifying counter-move by Tehran. Iran essentially said, "Fine, take your ships out of Hormuz, move them to the Red Sea. Our proxies will be waiting for you there." Saudi Arabia thought they were buying safety. In reality, they just traded a maritime threat for an aerospace threat. To defend a 1,000-kilometer pipeline, the Saudi military has to maintain an airtight, perfect kill web of air defenses 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The attacker only has to be lucky once. The defender has to be perfect every single time. We are witnessing a fundamental transformation in how global power is projected. The era of the maritime choke point is dying. For centuries, empires controlled the world by controlling the straits. The British did it. The Americans did it. Iran tried to do it with Hormuz. But human engineering has finally reached a point where geography is no longer destiny. Trillions of dollars are being poured into the sand to rewrite the map. The MSC land bridge, the Petroline expansion, the UAE's Adcop pipeline, and Iraq's development road. These are not just infrastructure projects. They are weapons of mass transit. They are concrete fortresses designed to starve the Iranian military of its leverage. Yet, this logistics revolution has not brought peace. It has merely elevated the conflict to a more sophisticated, more dangerous level. The battlefield has shifted from the surface of the ocean to the airspace above the desert. Iran is heavily isolated. Its greatest geopolitical trump card, the threat to close the strait, is slowly rusting away in the salty waters of the Persian Gulf. But a cornered actor is a dangerous actor. Stripped of their naval leverage, Tehran and its proxy networks will double down on drone warfare, cyber attacks, and ballistic missile saturation. The Middle East is no longer fighting over who controls the water. They are fighting over who can build, defend, and survive the sprawling megastructures on land. The Strait of Hormuz might be dying, but the war for the arteries of the global economy has only just begun. Saudi Arabia's entire geographic hack relies on hyper-efficiency. The MSC land bridge and the 9-port bypass system at Jeddah only work because they are highly automated. Cargo is unloaded by autonomous gantry cranes. Pipelines are regulated by complex digital SCADA systems. Trucks are coordinated by GPS and satellite tracking. In bypassing the physical water of Hormuz, Saudi Arabia has digitized its vulnerability. Iran is heavily sanctioned, economically isolated, and technologically starved in many sectors. But in the realm of cyber warfare, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operates one of the most aggressive and capable hacker networks on the planet. They do not need to physically blow up the Petroline pipeline to stop the oil. They only need to hack the industrial control systems that manage the valve pressures. We have seen this before. In 2012, hackers deployed the Shamoon virus against Saudi Aramco, wiping the hard drives of 30,000 corporate computers in a matter of hours. It was one of the most devastating cyber attacks in corporate history. Now, imagine a coordinated cyber attack on the Jeddah Islamic port. If Iranian state-sponsored hackers penetrate the port's autonomous logistics network, they could freeze the gantry cranes, they could scramble the shipping manifests, they could blind the satellite tracking of the truck convoys crossing the desert. A physical missile destroys a target, but a cyber attack paralyzes an entire system. Without firing a single bullet, without launching a single Shahed drone, Iran could create a massive digital bottleneck that leaves European and Asian cargo stranded in the Arabian heat. This is the ultimate paradox of modern logistics. Saudi Arabia spent billions of dollars pouring concrete and laying steel pipes to escape Iran's physical navy, but in doing so, they wired their entire survival to an internet connection. And in the cyber domain, Iran does not need a geographic choke point to choke you.